Hey, what's up everyone? So here I have this dude who doesn't look particularly hot. Lucky for him, today we'll make a thermal camera, which will make him look hot even through walls. We do this effect using camera stacking, post-processing, and shader graph. So if you want to follow along, create your project using HDRP or URP. I'm going to go with URP. This video is inspired by one of my favorite childhood games, IGI2 Covered Strike, in which you could see enemies through walls with thermal vision. Alright, let's get started. Usually everything with room's temperature is considered as cold and shown with blue. So we're gonna start by making everything blue. Create an empty game object for environment post-processing and add a post-processing volume, and create a new profile. I'll keep my project organized by putting everything thermal related into a separate folder. Add a color adjustment and in the color filter make it go a dark blue. I'm gonna bring down the contrast to -80. That's because thermal cameras don't see lights or shadows, they just see in temperature. So realistically we should bring it all the way down, but we'll leave a bit of contrast there to see the environment. To make our guy stand out, I'll duplicate this and I'll make this duplicate the child of the original one. And I'll rename it to Guy Hot. To be able to render it separately, we need to put it in a separate layer. I'll add a thermal hot layer, but I'll refer to this as the hot layer. So let's put our duplicate guy in the hot layer. Now let's duplicate the camera and put it under the main camera. I'll rename it to thermal camera. And let's remove the unnecessary movement script and the audio listener. So we want this camera to only render what's in the hot layer. So in the rendering, change the cooling mask to nothing and then thermal hot, and it will render nothing but the hot layer. But it's still blue, so we have to limit the post-processing to hot layer as well. In the environment, change the volume mask to nothing and then thermal hot. Change the render type to overlay so we can stack this on top of the other camera. Select the main camera and under stack add the thermal camera, and now we're camera stacking. Haha. Alright, I'm gonna put my post-processing stuff under the camera. And let's create another post-processing for the hot layer. Add the volume and another profile. And this one's only gonna have a bloom. I'll increase the intensity a little bit and I'll decrease the threshold to 0.5 so that the unlit materials can glow too. So we have to put this post-processing game object in the hot layer so that it can affect the hot layer objects. I'll create an unlit shader graph which I'm going to call thermal, and then I'm going to assign it to a new material which then I'm going to assign to the hot guy. So our shader is currently blank, so let's double click it to edit it. We're going to use this gradient which goes blue, green, yellow, orange, red, and white, going from cold to hot accordingly. Add a gradient and add the colors from left to right, going from cold to hot. Plug it into a sample gradient so we have control over the temperature using the time value. So let's add a property and call it temperature and drag it here and plug it into the time value so we can adjust the temperature for each material. I'll plug this sample to the base color, and as you see we can adjust temperature from the inspector. The temperature is going from 0 to 1, which apart from not making sense is hard to adjust. So we're going to make it go from 0 to 100 by dividing it by 100. Right now we're getting one solid color for the entire mesh, which is pretty rare if not impossible. So let's use a Fresnel effect to sample the gradient. but we will do so with also having temperature influence the strength. We will multiply Fresnel with temperature. Now it looks better, but still there's something wrong with this. Usually the edges are colder, but as you can see here, the edges are actually hotter, so we should invert the colors. And to do so, let's plug our Fresnel effect into an invert colors node. And we have to check the red channel since we only have one channel of colors. And now you can see the inverted version looks better, or at least more realistic. Speaking of realistic, this should fade out as we decrease the temperature. In the graph settings, change opaque to transparent and plug temperature into the alpha channel. And this will make him fade out in the environment. I also found that setting Fresnel power to -0.4 gives a more realistic result, as it will make the inner parts more intense. Let's duplicate the material one for the shirt so they can have different temperatures. This will work for separate objects or objects with multiple materials. But say I want to specify a different temperature to a part of the same mesh. For example, here I want the hands to be cold, but the face to be hot, just like in real life. We can do this using what I like to call thermal mapping, which is basically painting a texture that shows the temperature for different parts of the mesh. In Blender, I add a new material that I call thermal matte, and then I'm going to create a new image texture that I'm going to call thermal map. And we don't need alpha, and now we can start texture painting. Go to the texture painting tab and select the material, and start painting white for hot parts and black for cold parts. I'm going to start by making everything hot, and then I'm going to draw cold for the fingers and hands and a little bit of the arms and also the cheeks and the nose. Import this texture into Unity and let's duplicate this shader, and I'm going to rename it to thermal sprite as we're going to use a texture. Then I'm going to add a property at texture 2D for our thermal map. Plug the thermal map texture into a sample texture 2D and multiply it with temperature. Then switch the body shader to the thermal sprite and assign the texture. As you see, we are mapping the temperature, but it looks awful because I removed the Fresnel effect and also his pants are on fire. So let's first put his pants off and then add the Fresnel back. Alright, let's add the Fresnel effect and put its power to -0.4 and plug it into an invert colors node, and we're going to duplicate this multiply node, and we're going to multiply the Fresnel effect with the thermal map texture, and then we're going to multiply that with the temperature. And now it looks a lot better. And here's a comparison between with thermal mapping and without it. And from here it's just up to you how you want to use this, and yeah, that should actually wrap it up. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next video.